Whilst you set up, I'm looking for Joy in this session. So I don't, okay. So if Joy is here, you're taking over from me.
Yes, I'm here. Can you confirm if you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly. Let me give you co-hosting permission.
Okay. Right. I think we can start today's session. Once again, welcome everyone to today's session. This is our first session this year, and we are glad to have all of you in here today. So today we have John Munene, who's going to be taking us through a session on Infostealer malware. John is currently working as a SOC analyst, and much of what he does involves threat detection, digital forensics, and incident response, and responding to incidents at the SOC level, malware analysis, and reverse engineering. Outside of work, John also participates in CTFs in categories such as reverse engineering and mobile exploitation and malware analysis and forensics. So I'm very excited for today's session. I think we have quite a lot to learn from John. Everyone, thank you for joining in as we begin the session. For whatever questions you may have as the session progresses, feel free to raise them in the chat. John, over to you.
Thank you so much, Joy. So welcome, everyone. I hope we're going to have an amazing session today. So today we're going to be talking about Infostealer malware, as you guys can see from the title. So the dark world of Infostealer malware. Okay. So who am I? So my name is John. I work as a cybersecurity analyst at Entity Data. I am also a CTF player, first runners-up place in the NRF 2024 CTF. I also do reverse engineering, so mobile reverse engineering, and also malware reverse engineering. And maybe what I love and advocate for is secure AI and adversarial machine learning. So you can find my Twitter handle. You can also connect with me at Cyber Munene. So for today's agenda, so we're going to be talking about, so we're going to introduce Infostealer malware. Then we're going to look at the evolving threat landscape of the Infostealer malware, then the various attack vectors, and we're also going to look at after probably you have been compromised by the Infostealer malware, what happens after in the dark web. Then we're also going to learn about prominent Infostealer malware families, and from a blue team point of view, we are going to look at the detection opportunities in the Infostealer threat landscape. So I don't know whether you guys have heard about Infostealer malware before, or if this is your first time, but either way, I am just going to walk you through what Infostealer malware is and why I actually chose this topic for today's session and such stuff. So basically, like the word says, so Infostealer, so it's a type of malware or malicious software that is engineered to collect and exfiltrate. So those are the key components of the Infostealer. So it's supposed to collect and exfiltrate sensitive information from compromised systems. This could be applications, browsers, yeah. And so the reason as to why I chose this topic is because organizations work and remote work technologies, And from an individual level, most people are also embracing digital transactions. And so that brings now the key thing of safeguarding identities and credentials. So we need to be able to understand the concept of safeguarding the identities that we use to access, identities and credentials that we use to access systems remotely. So I'm just going to pause one point here. So if organizations have shifted to remote work technologies, then they actually need to protect them. So if identities are now the new perimeter as compared to traditional security mechanisms like, let's say, firewalls. So information stealing malware is what is going to help the adversaries to cross over. So what do I mean by that? So if an adversary is able to compromise your credentials, then they actually don't need more of that to actually get into your systems because they have the credentials and they can pose as a legitimate person. So they are able to access resources, they are able to access sensitive information and things like identity fraud. And yeah, so the life cycle of an infostealer. So the malware author is going to maybe develop the infostealer. As you can see, the initial stage in the life cycle is the creation of the infostealer. Then that infostealer is put on a platform for sale. So let's say Alphabet. So where cyber criminals can be able to purchase the infostealer. And when the infostealer lands in the hands of the cyber criminal, they can use it to launch maybe attacks. So they can use phishing attacks to send phishing emails. They can also use, in terms of distribution, other vectors, as we are going to see in the coming slides. And then once maybe you have received a phishing email that contains maybe an attachment that has an infostealer that is embedded inside it, and you have downloaded the infostealer into your system and your system has been infected, the infostealer starts working. So this could be after human interaction. So probably you have executed the infostealer, which posed maybe like a legitimate file. Then it starts collecting your sensitive information. So depending on the type of infostealer, this could be engineered to maybe collect information from various sources, like let's say browsers or even your system. So let's say Windows. So if assuming it's a Windows infostealer, it could be engineered to maybe extract passwords by leveraging the LSAS process, dumping credentials from the LSAS process. Then all that information, it could be processes running on a system. It could be sensitive information stored in files on the particular host. So any type of information that could be sensitive, browser information like passwords, cookies, tokens, APIs, API session keys, and such things. So these are logged and then they are sent to the cyber criminals, maybe command and control server, or probably where they want to maybe store the sensitive information that they have collected from you. So various protocols can be used. So if let's say I am transferring maybe information from your host through maybe I want to maybe dump those credentials and store them on Dropbox, or maybe I have a file server that I have deployed, then I can use various protocols like file transfer protocol. I could also use HTTP, HTTPS to maybe send those particular logs which I have obtained from your system to my server. Then at that point, the adversary can now advertise the sensitive information on maybe the dark web for other cyber criminals to purchase. So we could have probably like an initial access broker who purchases the logs. Then it could maybe develop access to the victim's workplace. So if I have launched a widespread attack, maybe I have compromised an organization and I have been able to obtain credentials for, sorry about that, for let's say 100 employees. So I can sell that to maybe another broker who could maybe gain access to the particular corporate or company. So the adversary may perform or launch further attacks, like ransomware attacks. So if let's say I have information about the sensitive files that are running on various hosts on that network, then I could launch further attacks like ransomware attacks. So, and that's why you can see in this particular image, I added this particular icon where maybe a company has been compromised with ransomware. So that is the life cycle of how Infostealers operate. Infostealers emerged in the 1990s, where they used to collect some basic information like usernames. Then they, in the early 2000s, they developed some complex techniques. Then in the current threat landscape, we can observe sophisticated techniques like encryption mechanisms being used and polymorphic code, which has been developed to evade detection mechanisms. So that is just the historical overview of Infostealers. So I think up to that point, we can proceed now to the next slide. So the evolving, the current threat landscape. So these are some insights from Red Canary. So throughout 2023 and also in 2024, so information stealing malware has been appearing top 10 in the monthly top 10 rankings. And stealers have accounted for 10%, nearly 10% of identified threats. And also, we can observe that they are targeting macOS systems nowadays. So, raising attacks on macOS systems with various threats like atomic stealer, which maybe are compromising keychains. So, a keychain in macOS is basically a structured way of storing keys and also compromising browsers. Then other specific macOS stealers could include MacStealer and MetaStealer. Then we are able to observe diverse malware families. So Red Canary has observed malware families like Yellow Cockatoo, which have various modules to facilitate specific functionality for information stealing, as compared to maybe previous Infostealers like Atomic Stealer maybe Still C, Ducktail. So Yellow Cockatoo has modules that are capable of more sophisticated things, let's say like command and control infrastructure. So that is what we have been able to observe in the evolving threat landscape of Infostealers. So for the attack vectors, so we have two attack vectors commonly for Infostealers, which are phishing and non-phishing. And I'm going to explain phishing first because that is what is most common. So when it comes to phishing attacks, so an adversary can use maybe Excel files or maybe Word documents through specially crafted emails. So you might receive an email that has an attachment, which could be an Excel file, a Word file, a Word document, an ISO file, or even a zip file. And that Excel file contains some macros, and once you enable those macros and they are executed, then other things could happen. So the macros could maybe download some malware from a remote server. So once the malware has been downloaded, let's say it's an Excel file that has macros, and once now you execute the macros, you download the Emotet malware, the malware family. So Emotet could be having various variants, which are designed to perform various actions, and maybe the behavior of how the variant is supposed to operate. So Emotet could now have a module that could be collecting maybe passwords, credit card information, and such stuff. And we could also have something like a Word document that maybe could have some malicious code embedded into it that could exploit maybe the Folina vulnerability. If at all, let's say the host is vulnerable to the Folina vulnerability. And also we could have ISO files, which could have some scripts that could maybe allow you to maybe execute some malware that has been pointed to by some LNK files. So the ISO file could have some malware or maybe a dropper that could maybe have let's say a pointer to some PowerShell scripts that would download malware from remote sources, like let's say ID, Bumblebee, or even Emotet for zip files. And just to illustrate what an LNK file is for maybe those guys who might not be understanding. So if you go to any maybe application on your desktop, let's say it's MirrorOp. I am using MirrorOp as an example here. And you look at the properties of this particular file, you're going to see that this target, this .exe binary is a path. So this is pointing to this path is pointing to this binary. So it's a shortcut to this particular binary. So when it comes now to the abuse of LNK files, adversaries are going to maybe make you download some files which could be pointing to some PowerShell scripts. So they could maybe make them seem like legitimate files on your desktop that once you execute, they are going to be pointing to some malicious partial scripts that could now maybe download additional malware that could perform other things when executed. So that was just for the illustration. So I think we can go back to the slides. So yeah, those are some of the abuse techniques that adversaries are using for Infostealers. So for the case of Bumblebee, if you look at security news, so these are some news that the Bleeping Computer site published yesterday. So this particular Bumblebee malware family had been taken down, but then we see that it has been able to come back, sort of. And now it's using various techniques, different techniques. So basically, this family is going to achieve infection via phishing or malvertising, and we're going to talk about malvertising or even SEO poisoning. We're also going to talk about SEO poisoning when we are looking at the non-phishing techniques. Then for the payloads by Bumblebee, we can see it can be able to deploy some Cobalt Strike beacons, which could be communicating with some command and control infrastructure in the backend. And the adversary could be sending some commands for control to the compromised host. Then it uses information stealing malware and various ransomware strains. So it's a combination of various techniques, maybe or tactics to achieve the objective of the adversary. So information stealing could not be the final objective of the adversary. It could be maybe data encryption, and they could maybe attain that, but information stealing could be the early stages of maybe the process. Yeah. So for the attack chain, the Bumblebee malware lures the victim to download the malicious zip archive, which contains an LNK shortcut, maybe labeled something like this. So from an organizational perspective, you could maybe think this is a report, which could trigger PowerShell to download some malicious MSI, so Microsoft installer files, and they could disguise themselves as legitimate drivers. Yeah. So once the MSI is executed, and that is silently using covert methods, for example, using these particular options, which ensures that the process runs without any user interaction. So for those who are blue teamers, so to avoid spawning new processes, which is noisier, the malware may use this particular table within the MSI structure, which instructs this particular binary to load the DLL into the address space and then to invoke this particular function. And then once the DLL is loaded and executed, the malware then unpacks and the process begins to deploy the Bumblebee into the memory. So this is a particular interesting blog that I found online, and I'm going to share with you guys to look into it. But yeah, so that was for the first case study. I think that was quite interesting to me. Then for the Folena exploit, we are going to, this was the vulnerabilities dubbed as the CV 2022-30190. So for the kill chain, so the adversary is going to identify some potential targets who maybe are likely to open Microsoft Word documents. And then when it comes to the weaponization, so the malicious Word document is crafted to include an external reference to maybe a HTML file. So the HTML file is what is going to contain the exploit code that is going to leverage these Microsoft support diagnostic tools to execute PowerShell commands. Then when it comes to the delivery, the document is delivered via phishing emails. So we can see that phishing emails are being utilized a lot as delivery mechanisms. So these are often disguised as legitimate communication to increase the likelihood of the document being opened. Then after the delivery, in the exploitation phase, the target opens the malicious document, then retrieves the HTML file from maybe a remote server. Then the HTML file, which contains the exploit, exploits the vulnerability in Microsoft support diagnostic tool to execute some code, arbitrary code. Then the exploit could run some PowerShell commands to download and install additional malware or infostealers on the victim system. Then the attacker establishes a foothold. Then now, for the communication with the adversary, the malware is going to establish a C2 channel, which is going to allow the attacker to send commands and receive the stolen data, and then the attacker now can perform the various malicious activities like exfiltrating the sensitive data, stealing credentials, and maybe even deploying further payloads to expand their foothold on the network. Yeah. So for the non-phishing attack vectors, we have search engine optimization poisoning, where an attacker is going to leverage search engine optimization. So if, let's say, I am an attacker and I know that someone is going to look for some certain keywords from Google, so I'm going to maybe deploy a website that is going to be holding malware or is going to be hosting malware that if I perform a Google search, and I know that when I enter these particular keywords on the Google search, my website is going to come on top since I have optimized it to be maybe accessible when I look for certain keywords for the particular website. Then I could perform maybe a type of squatting attack or something like that, and maybe enable victims to be able to visit my website, which could be hosting the malware. And once they have visited my website, the malware is downloaded onto their system. And this could be something like a bootloader. So bootloader is maybe some malware that is going to, an initial stage malware that is going to deploy further second stage payloads. So that is how maybe attackers are leveraging search engine optimization poisoning. Then for exploitation as an attack vector, so software versions that are maybe outdated. So guys who do not maybe update their browsers or maybe are running applications that are vulnerable. So attackers could leverage that and exploit the vulnerabilities. For instance, let's say outdated versions of Microsoft Exchange, or even maybe manage engine support center plus, which are vulnerable, and then exploit the vulnerabilities, then deploy malware that would maybe now start the process of information gathering on the host. Then for brute force types of attacks, so attackers could maybe identify critical systems that could be having, let's say, passwords, like let's say databases, SQL servers, SQL databases that maybe have information like usernames, passwords, credit card details, and other sensitive information. So attackers could brute force those particular servers. And if they're able to maybe find credentials that allow them to gain access to the servers, then they can start the process of deploying the Infostealer, which is going to maybe dump databases and send the information, the sensitive information to maybe the attacker's website. Yeah, so that is part of the phishing attacks that attackers are leveraging. So in the recent, in the few months, we have been able to identify malvertising as a new non-phishing delivery method. So attackers are using compromised social media accounts. So let's say Facebook or YouTube. So I compromise maybe a YouTube account or a YouTube channel. Then I post content containing links to malicious websites, or even maybe post maybe videos that could have maybe malicious software embedded into them. And if you download that, then I have already infected you. So basically, it's maybe attackers looking for domains, legitimate domains that, let's say, I know you have a Facebook account, and I know I can be able to maybe compromise you or maybe compromise your credentials through various social engineering attacks. So I could maybe lure you into providing me your credentials. And then once I gain access to your account, let's say it's a Facebook account, I post content that has malicious content, basically. So if it's a Facebook account, I am going to log in into your Facebook account, and then I'm going to post maybe some malware. And since maybe you're an influencer and people like downloading your content, then all those people who are going to click on those particular maybe URLs, which maybe have maybe malicious malware, are going to be infected. So that is an emerging technique that adversaries are using. So I can just show you an example here. So this particular YouTube channel has been compromised, and this is the legitimate content. But when you look at this is a malicious video that has been posted. So it's disguising itself as legitimate next to maybe content that is legitimate. So the YouTube channel has been compromised, and then malicious content has been placed next to legitimate uploads. And now, since I know most people are going to visit this particular YouTube channel, then if they click on this, then I'm going to infect their systems. So that is how adversaries are using this as a way of maybe infecting victims. So when it comes to the dark web, so after all those credentials have been compromised, maybe proprietary information has been obtained from maybe a company's network, this is sold on the dark web. So the dark web serves as a market where the cyber criminals are going to sell and distribute Infostealer malware. So the key components are where the adversaries are going to purchase. So like the marketplaces, they are going to purchase or rent the Infostealer tools, and these come with complete user guides. So even novice hackers can be able to just purchase some Infostealer malware on the dark web, and then they are going to use the user guide or maybe the customer support. So this has made it very easy for even newbies to be able to compromise even organizations, large organizations. So then the other key component is the information that has been maybe stolen. So this is also sold on the dark web. So things like credential dumps, databases, and personal information, which has been obtained through Infostealers, is going to be traded. And if, let's say, I am interested in gaining access to this particular, you're my target, I want to gain access to your network, then I can go and maybe purchase your databases from maybe platforms like Alphabet. Then affiliate programs also. So cyber criminals are becoming affiliates and promoting this, selling malware in exchange for a cut of the profits. Then another key component of this is not the key component, but the anonymity and the security of the dark web networks. So you're not able to access the dark web like you would access the surface web. So when it comes to how you're going to exchange maybe the malware and maybe how you're going to get the data that has been stolen. So this is obtained through the use of cryptocurrencies. You just don't use your M-Pesa or maybe your credit cards to buy malware on the dark web using. So you're going to use cryptocurrencies and you're going to access the dark web networks using Tor browsers. So this makes the transactions very difficult to trace, and this is facilitating the growth of this particular economy. So we can look at the prominent Infostealer families. So we have Redline. So this gathers credentials from browsers, password managers, and system files. And it remains a top threat due to its effectiveness and modular capabilities. Then these Lumacy too. So this is a traditional stealer, but it focuses on web-based credentials. So it's known for the ability to revive expired Google Auth account cookies. So this has been quite adopted. Then we have the Dactyl, which utilizes social engineering tactics via platforms like LinkedIn to lure victims with fake job postings. So the Dactyl is going to maybe utilize LinkedIn, and then the victims are going to maybe below to click on links which maybe they think are job opportunities or maybe other things on maybe other content on LinkedIn, but then that could be malware that has been posted on a particular URL. So this has been specifically targeting business managers and advertising accounts, and also we have been able to observe HRs being targeted. So someone is posing as a HR. So they are going to maybe create a profile on LinkedIn that is going to, let's say, look like the profile of a HR, but they are going to maybe post a job posting that has some malware, like let's say a link that is going to be redirecting people to websites that maybe are going to make people provide their information. Let's say it's a website that asks for your registration information. So let's say I have posted a job posting on LinkedIn, and then I'm telling you to maybe follow this particular website to register and maybe submit your personal information like your usernames and your passwords. And then just like that, your information has been maybe compromised. So yeah, that is how Dactyl utilizes the social engineering tactics using platforms like LinkedIn. So for detection opportunities, challenges and techniques, so we have varied detection mechanisms. So the different malware families exhibit different behaviors that can aid in detection. So this is from a blue teaming perspective. For example, the red line may not leave file modifications, but it could inject itself into maybe processes. So when it comes to detection, you're going to be vigilant on the or monitor the particular processes that maybe red line utilizes to inject itself into. So the key indicators of compromise could be uncommon process activity. Like, let's say you could monitor processes like install util.exe, msbuild.exe, and ASP.NET compiler.exe. So if these particular processes require execution using command line arguments, but if at all you see such a process being executed without command line arguments, then you should ask yourself questions. That should be suspicious. Or maybe this particular process, msbuild.exe, is making or establishing network connections. That can indicate also malware injection. Then you could also monitor file modifications. Particular directories could be app data, local low, and maybe program data directories for suspicious DLL files. So these particular malware, Raccoon and Vidar, could download maybe suspicious DLLs into these particular directories, and that can provide maybe additional detection points. So I think up to that, I have exhausted, but I just wanted to showcase this. If you go to this particular website, you can check whether your email address has been involved in a data breach. So have I been pwned.com? This is one way to identify whether maybe your email has been involved in a data breach. So if, let's say, I post like my email address, mine has been involved in one data breach. So I have been pwned once in this particular data breach in September. So we are observing the rise of Infostealers. So that's why I particularly chose this topic. So at this point, I'm just going to welcome questions and answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, John. That has been a very informative session. Session is open for questions and answers. If you would like to ask your question, you can type it in the chat, or you could unmute and maybe ask your question. John, maybe there's just one question in the chat maybe you could respond to. The very first one in terms of why Is there any particular reason why there's an increase in targeting of macOS?
Okay. So thank you for that question. So yeah, so adversaries have been able to maybe develop malware for like modular malware that maybe is able to attack cross-platform operating systems. So I developed one malware that can be able to execute on various systems. So let's say I develop maybe Atomic Stealer or maybe another malware that is particularly supposed to execute on a Windows host and is also supposed to execute on a Linux host and is also supposed to execute on a macOS system. So the ease of that is what maybe has led us into seeing the rise in attacks on macOS, because previously there were not many attacks on macOS systems, but the rise of programming languages that can allow you to develop cross-platform systems has also led to the rise of cross-platform malware. So due to that, we have been able to see the rise or maybe the target of also macOS systems. Yeah, I hope that answers your question, or maybe if you have more, I could clarify.
Thank you, John. That answered my question. Thank you so much for that response. You can see there's an interesting discussion going on in the chat. Is there anyone else with a question?
There's a hand up.
Yes, Voldemort, you can unmute.
Thank you guys. So mine would just be to add on to John's response to the question regarding marks. Additionally, what we can say is the aspect of marks becoming relatively affordable or accessible to a larger means of the population, which means the APTs also have a larger surface area to attack when it comes to mark, compared to initially when it was just a very niche part of the population that had access to marks, which would not really mean giving them a return on the efforts they would put to exploit Mark. That's also a reason why most APTs also tend to focus on Mark these days.
Very good information. Thank you so much. Is there anyone else with a question, feedback? Okay. I think that's going to be it for today's session. Thank you all so much for making the time to join in. Oh, there's someone who has raised their hand.
Yeah, and we also have some questions in the chat, I think.
Okay. Maybe I can hand it back to you, Laura.
Okay. There was a hand up. Maybe you can unmute and ask your question.
Extract passwords from your browser, like Chrome, Firefox, because there was an incident where a pretty close friend of mine had installed the cracked software, and once he installed the cracked software, the attacker later on, like a month later, sent an email showing him his workspace, like his desktop environment, and showing him all his saved passwords on Chrome and Firefox. So I just wanted to know how that works.
Leon, could you kindly repeat the question?
Well, I'm talking about an experience a close friend of mine had. So they were infected. They had installed a cracked software, and that cracked software apparently had some bit it had an Infostealer in it. So apparently his passwords, all his saved passwords on Chrome and on Firefox, they were all extracted, and the attacker, the guy who had actually like who had got who had perpetrated all of that, sent him an email. I think I can upload. I'll just redact the those important areas. He sent him an email showing him all the saved passwords, and then told him how his security was weak and stuff like that. Yeah. So I just wanted to know, like, what did the attackers abuse in order to like extract passwords from Firefox and Chrome? Yeah, that's what I wanted to know, because I noticed that the speaker had said that when you use haveibeenpwned.com, you're going to get information regarding whether your password like whether your email address and password have been leaked on a data breach. But for info stealers, it's different. Like, you can be infected by Redline today or an info stealer today, and then the next day, probably your cookies are being sold somewhere. Your Netflix cookies or your Discord cookies are being sold somewhere, and someone manages to use those cookies to bypass two-factor. You see, I think you get my point. Like, I just wanted to know that.
Okay.
How,
So,
how does that,
uh,
how does it work?
yeah, so there are a number of ways, first of all. So if at all your browser is outdated and you have not maybe done some patch management, then the attacker could exploit vulnerabilities in the particular browser and gather credentials, stored information, cookies, etc. Also, you talked about bypassing two-factor authentication. So if you look at a tool like EvilJinx, it's capable of bypassing two-factor authentication by maybe deploying uh, an attacker in the middle type of attack. So using a reverse proxy or something like that. So it's able to collect your maybe SMS-based codes or even maybe email-based codes. So EvilJinx is actually capable of doing that. So if at all, maybe of which I don't think the cracked software is what led to the compromise of the baby, or maybe bypassing the two-factor authentication. But for that, it could be due to vulnerabilities mostly. So maybe I'll just pose a question to you, like, how frequently do you update your browser even? Because your browser could be having vulnerabilities and you could not be aware. And if maybe I am able to exploit those vulnerabilities, then I can gather your Netflix passwords. And also, I could perform maybe something like a watering hole attack. So I know that you're going to visit Netflix, and I'm just going to wait for you there. So I'm going to compromise maybe hypothetically Netflix. And once you visit Netflix, I have already deployed my malware there. So if you visit that particular site, then you download some JavaScript, and that JavaScript executes on your browser, and it's capable of collecting your cookies. It's capable of collecting your other Netflix passwords and other information.
Okay, so what I meant about the two-factor authentication bypass is um, when someone has your session cookies, let's say like Discord session cookies or Netflix, even if you've set two-factor authentication on your account, I actually tested this. Even if you have two-factor authentication on your account, they can just restore those cookies and they'll just be like you and just like interact with the users normally like it was just a session, like they have just logged in like you. The two-factor authentication was nothing much to them, you see. And for the internet, for the browser part, well, um, yes, I haven't understood well about that vulnerabilities, like how a malware, an info stealer can use those vulnerabilities to exploit, to actually get those credentials that are stored in your computer. Because in my own understanding, on what on the research that I did, I understood that an info stealer sort of like abuses the DP API, the data protection API, which I just want to be sure about this. It abuses the data protection API, which the data protection API is the one that is in charge of encrypting your passwords, like the password that Firefox, Chrome stores. And if and there's also a master key. Yeah, take it. There's no Active Directory involved or anything. Let's just say that you're just your normal self. So when you usually log in, your and you put in your password, that password is your master key. And your master key interacts with the DP, the data protection API, to actually um, allow access to it. Like it opens access to that, to your passwords, like to your Firefox and Chrome passwords, you know. So I just wanted to be sure about this, like what I know, is it really that way, or like is it really that the info stealer like expects you like by the time when you're already logged in on your computer, that's when it actually steals your credentials, all your credentials that are stored on your browser, because those passwords that you save, those passwords that you save automatically on Firefox, Chrome, they are stored on your computer, you know. So I wanted to be sure about that, but from the research that I did, I realized that it may be abusing the data protection API. So I wanted to be sure about that, and also about the cookies bit. The cookies bit, I think I don't know if you've understood me well. Like for cookies, I can just use a cookie editor add-on and just like say you already have your cookies, so I can just take that cookie which is saved in a txt file. That's how any adversaries usually distribute them, and then I just restore it. Once I've restored it, I already have access to your account, you know, and there's no two-factor authentication that I'm supposed to like use to do something because I'm already in, you know, not unless if there's other, but I think you get my point. Um, so I just wanted to be sure about that. Like, can you tell me about that vulnerability? Like the vulnerabilities that, like, how does that work really? The info stealer stealing, sorry, not stealing, the info stealer, you abusing those vulnerabilities on your on your browser to get those passwords. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And how does an info stealer get those cookies, those session cookies, the cookies that I think if you've been doing CTI, yeah, threat intelligence, yeah, you might have noticed that threat actors have been selling cookies, mostly Netflix cookies, ever since they introduced the password sharing policy last year, because or like threat actors were using passwords. They were just like a lot of data breaches were happening, and many people were being infected by info stealers. So people would just take a username and a password from those data breaches or those info stealers, and then they just log in because people are using their password. They're just reusing their password. Okay, I won't speak further. It was just for that question. I've gone too far.
I didn't understand whether you were explaining that or you were asking a question.
Oh, sorry about that. I wanted to understand how the Infostealer like utilizes their web